Hello and welcome, Positively Healthy Moms. Welcome to my show, The Positively Healthy Mom, on the Zingo Network, channels 250 and 251, Spanglish World and the Her Networks. And be sure to download the Zingo app, rate it, leave a comment. And you can, of course, do this on all iOS and Android devices, Smart TVs 2016 moving forward, Roku sticks, Amazon Fire Sticks. So here we go. Today, I am welcoming my guest, Barbara Achilles Minardi. So Barbara, say hello to the Positively Healthy Moms.
Hello, Positively Healthy Moms. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's introduce you, who you are, what you do, why you're here. So I brought you on today because I was so intrigued. You and I kind of started following each other on social media a while back. I don't know how the connection happened, but it just did. And I've been so impressed with your work. So what stood out to me was you offer workshops and classes for really kids of all ages, but you can kind of clarify that. And so tell us, like, what is your focus?
Well, I have a children's program called Reach ATX, and it was founded in late 2022. And it's a children's program that focuses primarily on character education, modern manners, and leadership development. And I work with kids, like you said, from 6 to 16 primarily. And I have the privilege to be able to go to all these wonderful community organizations and talk to different scout troops and sports teams. Have enrichment programs in with a few of the school districts here in Central Texas. And I basically create and host these workshops designed to help children, then giving them life skills that I think will help, give them a leg up as they age, help them socially, academically, and hopefully one day professionally.
That's amazing. And so why don't you tell us, like,
Yes.
what, in your opinion, is the importance of learning these character strengths? And also maybe you could tag on to that in the conjunction. What about the modern manners? Is that kind of the same thing, or is that a separate thing?
Well, the our character education, character is who we are at our core, right? It,
Mhm.
it defines the actions we take, the behaviors we have, how we feel about ourselves, how we react and engage in the world, and
Mhm.
it's the foundation of who we are. So to not focus
Mhm.
on it, I think is troubling. That's why I want to focus on it. I want to have an intentioned focus on these topics, and then it ties in with modern manners because to be honest, when I first started doing this, I didn't think that manners really had a place today in a contemporary society.
Mhm.
But it does. It so much does. And the more I do this, the more I realize just how relevant it is, especially since so much of our engagement and the way we communicate with each other is online or,
Mhm.
via email or text. So when we have the opportunity to meet in person and engage with each other in person and one-on-one, you need to know how to have those soft skills to build the relationships and have the best experience you can.
I think
And
it's
so, yeah.
Yeah, this the way you're phrasing that sounds good because I think what pops into people's heads when they hear manners is like
Hmm.
etiquette. And like etiquette is this like
Hmm.
lost art, and it reminds us of like, the 1800s, and just being so civil and so polite. And our culture has really changed. I know in my lifetime, my mom always taught me to write handwritten thank you notes. So
Hmm.
that's a value of hers in our family. And I try really hard to still do it, but I just so prefer to just write a text, thank you for the
Yep.
whatever. It's so much
And that's
easier.
okay.
Is that the type of thing that part of what you're talking about? Just like,
Mhm.
explain a little bit more about that.
Well, the our behaviors change over time, right? They're fluid. They change like communication changes, the way our language changes, the way we interact with each other changes. And now that we have technology at our disposal, I don't think there's anything wrong with, sending a text, sending a video message. The manners, that the aristocrats put out, hundreds of years ago certainly have changed, but they're still necessary. They're still necessary to show, that we have respect for one another, that we are appreciative of one another, our gratitude. Those, regardless of the time, is always going to be
Mhm.
always going to be a necessity for us to engage with each other in a civil manner.
Mhm.
So those they're still relevant. The reasons behind them might have changed, or the way that we do them might have changed, but they're definitely still relevant.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's part of actually in my signature workshop that I give one of the words or terms that I kind of bring about to parents is I talk about the dehumanization of our culture, and that how
Yes.
people are learning to treat each other as a little bit like less than human. We have kind of evolved. And so I kind of explain this process of we're going, the standards of our culture, kind of like what you're talking about, are moving goalposts over time.
Mhm.
So what was once appropriate in the 1920s, as far as what we would wear to the beach or a pool, is now
Mhm.
completely different, right? That is shifted. And so sometimes like our culture shifts so quickly that humans can't really keep up with the way it
Yeah.
shifted. So then all of a sudden we're acting a little bit, you know, uh, just less than we probably ideally would want to be, because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's all about human connection, right? That's all what it's
Mhm.
about. But somehow, like the phones and teenagers and technology, that's kind of one of my specialties, is they're not really learning that skill. They don't have the knowledge to really understand
Mhm.
that when they cyberbully somebody or embarrass somebody with a picture, or when things go viral, that is really treating each other as though we are less than human, that dehumanization aspect.
Mm.
So it's interesting how,
Absolutely.
our two worlds kind of intersect in that way, where you're really bringing about, this knowledge to kids about how to treat each other civilly, how to give respect, how to treat them well. And so can you talk a little bit more about the character strengths that you teach about?
Well, I try and teach about as many as possible. Primarily, some of my most important or my more popular workshops deal with loyalty and honesty and friendship.
Hmm.
I have another workshop that deals with gossip, called "Loose Lips Sink Ships," and how
Mhm.
gossip and is harmful for friendships. Yet at the same time, we still need an opportunity to vent, and the subtle differences between those two topics.
Mm.
I have workshops. My modern manners workshops obviously are about showing respect and gratitude and appreciation. I also talk about the power of words and how they have weight and the ability to kind of change our world. Right? They shape who we are and the reality of what we do. And so I try and teach all of the character, all of as many character strengths as possible given
Mhm.
the workshop. And then I also have a program called Super Leaders, which I have as an after school program. And for super leaders, I talk about a certain historical leader throughout the world in history. And
Mhm.
we deep dive into their character strengths, their traits, the things that have made them successful. And so it runs the gamut. I mean, from Florence Nightingale and her bravery and perseverance, to
Mhm.
grit and resilience are also a very big part of the workshops that I teach. So I really try and give as many opportunities to highlight and foster these strengths as possible.
Mhm. I love
And,
that.
and and also oftentimes, with children, sometimes you start off with an idea and they take it somewhere else. And so I'm always trying to be open to where they're going and allowing them to kind of guide the discussion and, teach them what they want to learn as well.
Mhm. And so, what advice do you have for parents whose kids are not able to attend your programs because you are locally based here in Austin, Texas? How
Mhm.
can you help them? Because our listeners are literally worldwide. We have listeners in every country, and so what advice can you give them?
I think it's the advice that parents know all the time that we are the greatest teachers. Our children, we model the behaviors for our children. And so, in order for our children to become the type of people we want them to be, we need to be the type of people that they need to be. We need to be the change that they see. And so, modeling the good behavior, making sure in your everyday life when you're late to HEB or you're running to school that your behaviors are appropriate because your
Mm,
children pick up on everything. And
mhm.
in these moments where we're not really our best selves is when we kind of do the most teaching to our children. So modeling good behavior, right, at all times when we're frustrated, when we're angry, when we're exhausted, not
Mhm.
letting those times weaken us. And then, just taking care of ourselves, is the best thing for us to do, not only for ourselves, but so our children see that it's okay to take care of ourselves, that it's okay to put ourselves first and think of our own well-being as a way to be stronger for everybody.
Absolutely. That's something that I talk about all the time
Hmm.
because we as moms
It's
are
hard.
we're pretty worn out. We're pretty
Yeah,
tired. We're pretty
it's
stressed.
hard.
ever. Yeah, it is hard. And so
Yeah.
it's so important. I just actually had a mom at my workshop yesterday who says she works with teenagers all day at school, but then she's got her own teenagers at home. And she was trying
Mhm.
to figure out how she could apply the tools that I had taught her when really she's so exhausted because she finds that
Tired.
her temper
Mhm.
is just like a shot at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so my advice to her was just to take 5 to 10 minutes in the car
Mhm.
before she goes in her house. I said, they're hungry, they're waiting for you, they want dinner, they might need help with their homework, but just sit in your car for 5 to 10
Yeah.
minutes and just get emotionally regulated, do some of the techniques I taught her, some breathing exercises, and then really to kind of empower herself through her identity. And so one thing I do teach, which, we're going to short track this at the moment, but it's just all about who do you need to be at this moment in order to
Yeah.
accomplish what you want. And so that really just gives yourself usually the energy to be like, okay, I can tackle this part of my day. But the theme is
Mhm.
that it's hard. Like no matter what job we have, we're still all moms, and it is hard.
Mhm.
Even if you are the stay-at-home mom, and even if you have one child, that's still a lot, right? It's like
Mhm.
it doesn't kind of really matter necessarily the circumstances. What matters is that we're moms, and that
Yeah.
raising a child is hard no matter what.
Well, I was a substitute teacher for a long time as well, so I know the feeling of coming home and being
Mhm,
completely tired of being around kids. I know, I get it. I've been there. And I would do the same thing. I would close myself in my bedroom for about 5, 10
mhm,
minutes, tell my kids
mhm,
not, I can't be a mom right now. But I
mhm,
think what's important in addition to what you said is also telling the children why. Like it's not you, it's not that I don't want to
mhm,
be a mom to you or show you the attention that you deserve, right? Because
mhm,
even though you've been with children all day long, or the woman that you spoke to, they've missed you all day long. So
mm,
you need to be respectful of their needs as well. And I think if the more open you are and the more you communicate with your children about why I'm feeling this way and why I need a moment, again, is not only good for you at the moment, but then it'll teach your children later on how to engage with their children and, express their needs and their boundaries to other people.
mhm. I think that's awesome, and that's so important for you that you've talked about in the past is like the why with all your classes. So when you teach
Mhm.
your classes, you're explaining the kids why you're teaching them this. So do you have some examples of that? I know the Breaking Bread program is something you give the why with.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these, and I was thinking the same thing growing up, that these were arbitrary rules, designed by some board aristocrat to drive us crazy, right? To drive us mad, have all these rules to remember. But there's really significance and an origin that makes perfect sense behind all these things, all these
Mhm,
rules, right? From basic hygiene rules to how to show appreciation. So the why is very, very important. I hear a lot of whys in my class. But the etiquette is there for varying reasons. When we understand our expectations and what's expected of us at a dinner or a party, when we know what to expect, we can spend the time and energy doing other things, more fun things, engaging with other people. We don't have to worry about which drink is mine or where do I put my napkin or all these things that are pretty frivolous in the moment. And we can focus on engaging with people and building
mhm,
relationships.
mhm.
It's funny you mentioned about the why because I've been working on a new workshop called Curious Courtesies. It's kind of a tongue twister for me,
Cool.
but it deep delves into the why and all of the kind of odd origins of these, what we
Mm,
think are arbitrary uh, rules, right?
mhm,
And the kind of funny and bizarre origins of them. So one, for example, I think this is one of my favorite, is why we cheers. Obviously, I'm not teaching the children to cheers, but why as adults do we have the tradition to cheers?
mm.
And it's actually interesting because back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the royalty would have to be nervous about people poisoning their drinks.
Oh,
So
yeah.
as a way to kind of circumvent and to make it feel the royal family feel safer, everybody would pour a little bit of their drink into their neighbor's drink.
Oh,
And this over the years turned into everybody putting their drinks together and cheersing, right? Everybody sharing a little bit of their beverage to make it known that, the drinks are okay. No one's going to get poisoned in this.
wow.
So the whys are kind of funny, you know what I mean? And you don't really think about them until, you at one of my classes and you're curious, why does this matter?
Mm,
So yeah, and the why is important too because children are more apt to take it in and memorize it and have it be a lifelong lesson when they understand the background to
Totally.
it.
Yeah, it puts it
Yeah,
in context. It's not just some arbitrary thing. Like
absolutely.
you're saying. Yeah, it
Yeah.
has a purpose. And even if the purpose is outdated, it's still tradition. And so kind of learning about that is really good.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think the why, quite honestly, is really
Honestly, is
just
really
as important for
just
the mom. So if we go back to the example of the mom being super stressed out and,
Mhm.
she's just in survival mode. So if we're talking to the moms right now that are in survival mode, and then we're talking to them about learning character strengths and modern manners, like for some people that might start to put them into a tailspin.
Mhm.
They're like, "Oh my gosh, like I can barely get food on the table." So
Yeah.
let's speak a little bit more to the importance of this kind of the concept of like an emotional intelligence versus the intellectual intelligence. Like we all know that we want our kids to make good grades in school and to
Mhm.
try hard because we know that has a purpose, like that'll help us get a good job. But can you share your thoughts about like building up like that person, who they are on the inside in that emotional intelligent way?
Again, it goes back to my theory about the parents being the best teachers. You have to model this behavior. If
Mhm,
you're so stressed out, I mean, I get it. I've been there. I wish I had, a magic solution
mhm,
to help the moms. But take a step back, remember that you're your children's greatest teacher. And
mm,
I think, your children again pick up on every little thing you're trying that you put out into the world.
mhm.
And so you had a guest on your podcast recently who brought out the oxygen mask
Oh yeah.
analogy that so commonly gets discussed when
Mhm,
when you're stressed out and we're frantic and we're frustrated, and we're trying to take care of so many things. Why it's so important to put the mask on us, right? Put the mask on
mhm,
us, and so we take care of other people. But I also think it's important to put the mask on us first and to take care of ourselves first, because then the child might actually learn, oh, you know what, mom doesn't need to put the mask on me. I can put the mask on myself. And then I can help my mom. You know what I mean? I hope that
mhm.
makes sense. But again, it's the modeling. If you're not going to teach your children how to be a good, calm child who is harmonious and is confident when you're not. And I wish I had a magic wand or a solution to help the moms de-stress. I'm also, a mom, always trying to de-stress myself.
Yeah.
But again, just remembering that your children are seeing everything. They are
Mhm,
taking everything.
mhm,
And that's my best advice. If you need a moment to yourself to act in a way to get your emotions out, do so where your children can't see you. Go to the bedroom, act out your frustrations, and then come back out, you know?
mhm, mhm.
That's all I
And
can
I'm
suggest.
thinking of so when I teach, I talk about 4 different parenting styles, and so, kind of like what I'm alluding to a little bit is maybe, actually, it could kind of fall under several different categories when I talked about the stressed out mom, because quite honestly, all parenting are
Yeah.
stressed out moms, but I have there's 4 quadrants if you can imagine them, and, the kind of axes on the horizontal basis is boundaries. So on
Mhm,
this one side, it's very strong boundaries. On this other side, it's very weak boundaries. And then
mhm,
the top to bottom is kind of lovingness
kind
or
of
caring, and
lovingness or
then the
caring.
bottom is a little bit less caring. And so, if
Mhm,
you can imagine this, what happens is that that top left is the helicopter parent, where they are
mhm,
very, very loving, very, very nurturing, all these things, but yet they're not strong on the boundaries. And so, or there's also the other term that people use now, snowplow parenting, which is they're just
mhm,
paving the way to make life easy for their kids. They're so concerned with their child's happiness instead of having their child having to learn some struggles, so that they're actually
mhm,
building their character, building their strength, and building that grit
mhm.
and resilience. So I
Yeah,
feel like that, is like a great kind of understanding for the parents to see that maybe they are actually, I don't want to use the word harming their children, but kind of doing their children a
mhm,
disservice by
mhm,
this helicopter parenting style. And then I'll go through the styles, and then maybe you can comment on all of them. Then the bottom left quadrant is low boundaries, low caring,
mhm,
or low nurturing, and that is the avoidant parent. So they're the ones that are kind of checked out. They're too busy. Either they're too busy with work, they're too busy partying, they're too busy with something else in their life that's a
Well,
distraction from
the
the
distraction.
connection with their child. Or they
Mhm,
just have inability to connect emotionally. Maybe they've had some trauma in the past and they just struggle with interpersonal relationships. Bottom
Mhm.
right is high boundaries, but low caring. And so they are like the military style parent. They are
Mhm.
very much into control. They're into punishment. They are hardcore on rules,
Mhm.
timeouts, taking away the phone, all sorts of things like that. And so, we probably can have some issues there. And I'd love to get your feedback about that. And then the top parenting style, the authoritative style, is what I style, which is strong on the caring and the nurturing, and also strong on the boundaries. And so that kind of
Mhm.
really makes me think about all the things that you're doing. So can you like maybe comment on those parenting styles and how it relates to what you're doing?
Well, I'm not really sure how to I'm not really sure how to answer that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, again, the classes that I teach aren't, going to change a child's life overnight. I'm simply
Mhm.
planting a seed. I'm one of the many, hopefully, things that are in a child's life to kind of support them and booster them up. But the parenting styles, that's all we know, right? We teach what we know. We don't consciously teach in a certain way. It's
Right.
just the way we react. It's subconscious, it's subconscious, and it's like breathing and blinking.
Yes.
Um, so I don't I'm not the expert on parenting,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Um,
No, that's kind of my thing. So I kind of threw that on you,
yeah,
But I thought it's kind of cool to just think about how our two worlds do intersect in that way,
yes.
because when you think about it, the authoritative parent, that healthy style, is really the
Mhm.
one that is probably modeling the best, character strengths
Mm,
and the best manners for their parent or for their children. That doesn't mean the other parents aren't modeling it correctly. However, um, if we're always trying to make things easy for our kids, then maybe we're not being the best role models, right? Like
mm,
maybe we are
absolutely.
bulldozing some people. Maybe we're the type that's like, well, I want to fight for my child, so I'm going to jump in line in front of this other parent, or maybe I'm going to put
Mm,
this other kid, kind of like being like a little bit aggressive or assertive on for the sake of their child, but then the child's watching that, and so then
yes.
they suddenly have this like entitled thing. They're like, "Oh, well, I'm more important than this other family because my mom's
Mhm.
ahead." Right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, it can get really complex. We could get really, really, really deep into that. So let's kind of stay focused on your lane. So yeah, again, talking about the why, the emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
What about, again, with the character strengths, I think what's cool is I know I use them to coach clients. So when I
Mhm.
can help a client feel good about themselves, whether it's the parent or the child, right? Like, I see this strength in you. How can we use that to kind of like achieve the goal that you want to achieve, and kind of really build that up? And so I have a feeling that when you're working with your classes and your workshops, you're kind of maybe asking them to like find what they like about themselves, or like
Mhm.
figure out what their strengths are.
Absolutely.
Do you help like elicit that out of them?
Yes, well, I mean, and that comes I've been doing a lot of research on the positive psychology and focusing on our strengths and not our weaknesses, right? And that's exactly what I do, right? I think back in, when we were younger, it was what was wrong with you? How can you fix what's wrong with you? Well,
Mhm,
and then completely ignoring our strengths, the things that make us actually wonderful people. And so I
mhm,
do that. I try and focus on our strengths and allow those strengths to guide us on how to have proper behavior, make great choices, how to have, make ethical decisions. And yeah, the strengths are everything. And knowing our strengths, knowing the type of person we are is important, because then we can make better decisions. It also allows us to interact with other people better and understand other people also.
mhm,
Going back to the character strengths and the teaching of them, and the intention of explaining what each one is to the children. Yes, they hear about them in the periphery, or and, in different venues, but to have the intentional focus on them allows them to develop them themselves and see it in other people and recognize it in other people more.
mm,
um, so I think it's important to, again, the strengths, knowing yourself, having a real understanding of who you are at the core is very important.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay, let's shift gears a little bit. So, I want to dive into more of you as a mom. So, tell us a
Okay.
little bit, like your kids' ages, and then I would
Yeah.
love to, and then I'll follow up with, what have you taught them? I know you're probably trying to teach them
Mm.
everything that you teach in your workshop, but I know they're a little bit younger. So tell us about their ages again.
Yeah, I have a son who's 7 and a daughter who's 9. My son is in first grade, my daughter's in third. And they were really the core, the reason I started doing this. When
Mm,
I had the idea to do this, I was, talking to some of my girlfriends, and I'm like, worst case scenario, nobody understands what I'm trying to do. This doesn't really, have much traction. Worst case scenario, maybe my kids will learn a thing or two. You know what I mean?
mm,
So
mhm.
even if my focus and my dream doesn't, come to fruition, worst case scenario, my kids picked up something. And they help me a lot in the workshops when I go and do my promotions, and I go around to different events. My kids are always there with me. I think it's important not only for them to hear what I have to say, but to see how I'm putting myself out there, to see how I'm, communicating with new people, how I'm marketing myself, and trying to build a business.
Mm,
So there's so many benefits to what I'm doing for my kids. And it's funny because even in all my material that I make for the schools, because I design the curriculum for my after school workshops and enrichment programs, and on each little footnote it has for Gabby and Jax, which are the name of my kids. So they're
oh,
really the intention. They are a part of everything I do. You
mm,
know, and the way I come up with a lot of the workshops are because of situations that I've had with my children, or
yeah.
being a substitute teacher, seeing things on the playground that, wow,
Mm,
somebody should really sit down and focus on this with the kids. And
mhm.
it's funny because that's where I got the motivation, or the idea for Loose Lips Sink Ships, about how kids say sometimes too much of the wrong thing, but not enough of the stuff that they need to be telling us, right?
Mm,
And
mhm,
so teaching them, okay, this is what you need to tell a grown up about. This is what you need to tell, a trusted adult about.
mhm.
And maybe this isn't so important. It's interesting, but maybe we should focus on other things. And it's big also in the elementary school too, is because kids don't know what's relevant and how to prioritize what they want to say. And maybe something actually really bad happened that they should have told a grown up about, but then they go home and they tell their parents, but the teachers and the subs and the people that work in the elementary school never heard about it.
Yeah.
So teaching them that, yes, you do want to tell your parents, but let us know too. Tell us this important stuff, because I think kids are nervous or scared, or they just don't realize that it's a priority. It's an important thing to discuss.
Mm, mhm.
But yeah, going back to my kids, they're fantastic. They are a part of everything I do here. And so yeah, worst case scenario, maybe they'll pick up a thing or two.
I have a feeling they'll pick up more than a thing or two for
I'm
sure.
hoping.
Yeah, yeah, but I love the concept of it must make your work and your personal life feel like really organically intertwined,
Mm,
because if you're like kind of coming up with ideas about, say you're at a birthday party with one of your kids and you see something, you're like, "Oh, that might be a good idea of something to teach
yeah,
to my class or in my class,"
yeah,
right? It's like you're kind of like coming up
absolutely.
with this stuff. And so that's what I like about it, because this isn't just some like this is real life. Like you don't just teach theory, you're actually kind of practicing what you preach, because these are things that have
Yeah,
really happened. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, that's kind of where I get a lot of my inspiration as well, because have got teenagers of my own, and so then I'm constantly like, oh my gosh, this is a thing I need to start talking about more of, or
Yep.
focus on. So I like that. And what do you hope that someday they say about you?
Oh goodness. I hope they say the same thing that I say about my mom. My mom's also a big inspiration for this. She's very strong. She's had overcome a lot of obstacles in her life. I don't know a lot of people that would have persevered as well as my mom has.
Mm,
And so I hope that there's some equal respect and consideration there. Um, and I've tried really hard to do good for them.
mm,
Like I said, a lot of the stuff I do is because of them. They are the ignition to all of this.
mhm,
Um, and I just want them to think that, I did the best I could.
mhm,
And again, just think warmly of me. I think, the relationships between parents and children are often very complicated with lots of, layers and just, I mean, I have it as well. But regardless of all that, regardless of all that, I hope they have positive things to say and they realize that, they were the center of all of this.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
I love that. So it made me think, what if you have a mom who really is needing help with her kids,
Mhm.
and she thinks she's modeling, or she's trying to model, or she's doing her best to model, but no matter how hard she tries, it just doesn't seem to take with her kid. It doesn't seem to work. And so she finds out about you from today and they want to enroll in your workshop, but yet they have a resistant child. Like what advice or encouragement could you give to the mom in order to maybe somehow help get the child there? And then if the child is there and they're still resistant, how can you help break down those walls a little bit?
I've come across those kids quite a bit because my workshop is not really a workshop that people technically, that people are that familiar with. They don't really have expectations to tell their children. They don't really know what to tell their children. So their children are even more, confused coming in. So I understand that. When I was a child, I was extremely shy. I was like painfully shy and self-conscious. I had a speaking disorder, making things, communicating a huge challenge. And so I can relate to the children that are nervous, that don't understand, that want to
Mm,
hide. And so I'm really good. One of my strengths is talking to those children and
mhm,
calming them down and letting them know that we're all kind of scared here.
mhm,
Nobody really knows what's going to happen, but let's sit
mhm,
down and try our best. And then if the child doesn't want to be there, if it's painful or confusing, I don't
mhm.
want that child there. And I know that probably isn't the answer to your question,
Oh, it is.
but I'm not a professional in that regard. I don't want to make a child forcefully put a child through something that they don't want.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would try and encourage and let them know that we all feel nervous
Mhm,
and scared and apprehensive when we are put into new environments.
mhm,
Um, but I want the child to enjoy themselves and eventually get that comfort. And if they're not going to, well, then maybe we'll try it again in 6 months. Maybe
right.
some growth for them might be what they need.
Well, I think that's
Or just maybe a different avenue. I have quarterly workshops at the Lake Travis Community Library where I do free community events for everybody in the area. And so maybe, encouraging the child to come to one of those free events with their family, getting to know me, kind of getting to know the vibe and what I represent, maybe then they'd be more comfortable later on doing something a bit more private with me. But I
mm,
think it's all baby steps, right? I don't want the kids to jump in.
yeah.
That's not gonna be fun for anybody.
Yeah, I
Mm,
think that's an excellent answer. It just, maybe it's not the right time, maybe it's
yeah,
not the right fit at the moment, but that doesn't mean it's
yeah,
not going to be in the future. And I like that idea of
mhm.
baby steps. And nobody is going to really be receptive if they're so shut down they won't be able to
No,
learn. So how do you make it fun for the kids? Because I'm imagining, like, the mom's thinking, oh, my child wouldn't like that, or they wouldn't think it was
oh,
fun.
yeah.
So what do you do? I mean, I know you because I've met you personally, and you
Mhm.
are very fun and engaging. You're dynamic, like that's your personality. But how do you, like, apply that to the curriculum?
That's part of everything I do. The kids aren't going to learn if they're not entertained, right? And they're not going to want to come back if they're not entertained. It's not going to sit. They're not going to like me. So, engaging with them, having them relax and know that I'm not some rigid woman, in there with a ruler trying to teach them etiquette,
Mhm.
but that there's real world applications for this. And, maybe we're not going to have the most fun right now, but later on, you'll leave here with a smile on your face.
Mm.
Just be receptive to the information, and then we'll get through it. Because a lot of it is kind of these rigid rules sometimes, or these,
Mhm.
these definitions that are a bit dry when I'm trying to teach about character strengths, like the definition of resilience and perseverance. You have to explain these, and the kids kind of in one ear, out the other.
Mhm.
So I explained that, after we get through all the grit of it,
Mhm.
that there'll be fun, that there'll be activities. And I always make jokes. I'm always light. I try not to take the class too seriously.
Mhm.
When I was younger, I one of the reasons I started doing this was that when I was younger, I was an assistant to an etiquette coach in high school. This is what I did for my high school job.
Cool.
So I was always in the finishing programs. I was always going around to different events and areas and watching her teach the children and watching her, do the trainings.
Mhm.
And kind of having that lens of seeing what worked, seeing what didn't, taking the things that I knew that were necessary, making sure that I brought them in, but doing it in a way that it was more modern, more fresh, more entertaining, cracking jokes. I'm a big fan of Shrek. So a lot of my workshops have Shrek references, and
Oh,
who
fun.
doesn't love Shrek, right?
Yeah,
And so I try and bring in little clips and little funny things, just to keep the children entertained and make it an event and not just lessons. Does that
yeah.
make sense?
It
Okay.
does. No, it totally does. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that sounds like a lot of fun. And then what's your take on kind of like boys versus girls? Because when you talk a lot about this stuff,
Mm,
what I think of is girls being able to kind of like want to be more interested in this and want to absorb, because we're like relational, and boys tend to have that stereotype of being like the more physical. And so this information might not be as relevant. But you have a daughter and a son, so I'm sure
yeah.
you've learned a workaround for that. So how have you done that?
I a lot of my workshops are more boy heavy, which
Mhm,
is shocking to most people because they think, oh, well, this is for girls. The modern manners, that's a girl thing.
mhm,
My son's not interested. But I find the boys are actually very receptive. I think that some of the girls kind of think they know this already, or that their parents have kind of drilled these courtesies and these manners into them already. So it's just
mhm,
another person telling them, to sit nicely, sit up straight, keep your elbows off the table. Where the
mhm.
boys, this is kind of new to them. We have this bias on how we treat our children
Yes,
subconsciously. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
even though we want to say that we treat our children equally, we
Mhm.
feminize our girls and we mask, like, it's just
Uh,
subconscious, right?
yeah.
And so I think the kids come in, the girls are already like up to here with the manners and the sitting properly. So the boys, I think, are get more out of it. I think they appreciate it more sometimes. But then again, I hate to paint them with a broad brush because each person is so individual and each child has such
Yes.
a different response to the program. But I think people are shocked when they realize, oh my gosh, there's a lot more boys in here than I had anticipated.
Mhm.
And and I don't treat them differently. Everybody gets, um, but it's a bit of it's just something that people aren't don't expect as much, the boys in the class, and
Yeah.
how receptive they are to it.
Yeah. I have my own personal, I don't know what I call it because I can't necessarily take credit for it, although maybe I can since I'm their mom. But my son, who's 14, well, I have two sons and two daughters, but my son who's 14, I think he's so polite, and he always says, "Hi,
Yeah.
mom, how's your day?" And I'm like, "What other 14-year-old
Mhm.
boy says that?" Right? Because we typically think of them as being so self-absorbed, they're so into their own
Yeah.
things, and, when I hear that, I would every time, I don't know why I'm so shocked, but I just think it's the cutest thing. Or, my other
Mhm.
son who's 12, I love it when he texts me and he says something like, "Thank you," like I've done something for him, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Thank you," and I'm like, I don't know why I'm so shocked. They're my own kids. I should know that like that's part of it. But it makes me feel good, as a mom
Mhm.
to feel like I'm doing a good job. And the thing is, though, I don't think they were always that way. I think somehow maybe just like part of their development and part of what I've been teaching them. And so
Mhm.
what do you feel like? Do you, because you work with such a wide range, can you tell us kind of like what you see in like the 6-year-olds versus the 16-year-olds? Like, what are some of the kind of unique things about each age group?
16-year-olds are definitely harder to to talk to to teach than the younger kids. The younger kids are still very malleable and excited to be in a new environment, and they see
Yeah,
all the colors and the activities, and they're curious, right? The
yeah,
16-year-olds are kind of checked out, and
yeah.
they're on their phones, and
Mm,
I'm not cool. My Shrek references just are kind of
they're not
missing the mark.
landing.
No, they don't like donkey.
Yeah.
um but again, it's the broad brush. I hate to say it all, to the 16-year-olds, but they come here with their on their iPhones and everything, so constantly asking them to please put their technology away.
Mhm,
Um, but yeah, you would think though that the older they got, the easier they would be, but I find
mhm.
that the younger kids are the most curious and excited and the most willing to absorb what's being taught to them.
Yeah, they're the most open. So it's almost better,
Yeah.
not that you don't like to do it, but it's almost better. It's like if you're
Mhm,
going to do it, start them young when they're open and
mhm.
receptive, and then that just kind of, because our brains, they're neuroplastic and they're
Right.
changing and they're firing and rewiring and all this stuff, and that's what happens developmentally is, we shed a lot of the unimportant information at about the age of 11 is when the brains start to
Mhm.
shed those initial connections that were made when they were babies and toddlers, but that information is no longer relevant. So it's like this information is relevant. And so how can you help the moms continue to reinforce it? Because if they learn it when they're 6, they're going to kind of need the
Mhm.
constant reminder. So what do you do for the parents to help them?
The constant reminders, sitting down at dinner and talking about these things,
Mhm.
modeling them, making sure that they're around, family members or neighbors that are also modeling this behavior and
Mm,
have it be intentional, right? A lot of families think, oh, well, my children are in sports, so they'll pick up the resilience and the grit because they're great, in sports. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But
mhm,
again, it's a peripheral type of learning. I think the intentional learning is where you really need to be at with this kind
mhm.
of stuff.
Okay.
And just the constant talking about it, bringing it up at dinner time, make talking points, make a list of, have you seen anybody represent, this characteristic today, or how
Mm.
did you represent this characteristic today? When I drop my kids off at for school, I always tell them to be kind, to be helpful, and to be funny.
Huh.
And which I think are very important, right? Because very different, strengths, but very necessary for engagement and communication and building, friendships and relationships with people. One of the things that I focus on, like you said, how do I keep the children entertained, is humor. I think humor is one of the very, commonly overlooked character strengths.
Mm,
But it's very important for, making people feel comfortable around you, having people feel warm and wanting to be in your presence. And so, you know, encourage the strengths that your kids are naturally kind of drawn to or exhibiting, and just the intention, bringing it up again over and over and over again. I mean,
mhm.
not in a drill sergeant type of way, but just in as casually as you can.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was just gold, pure gold, what you just said. Kind, helpful, and fun. Is that where
Yeah,
there's the
funny,
3? Oh, funny.
funny, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because you did say humor. So, okay, that just
Yeah.
making sure. So kind, helpful, and funny. And so that's coming from
Hmm.
you, and that's what you're teaching your kids. And so I
Hmm.
think that's something that I'm going to start sharing with my kids. I think that's really valuable because it's like what
Thank
I'm
you.
those things make a great friend and they make a great
Hmm.
classmate, make a good kind of just like good citizen. And so what about, bringing up or bringing out the character strengths in maybe someone that's not it's not as easy or it's not as obvious. Maybe they are the more closed off child and they're not really showing you what, or maybe they're showing like some negative things and you're having a hard time finding those positives. How do you help them do that?
I think just, going through different activities,
Mm,
sports, Girl Scouts, Scouts, putting them in an environment to where they're maybe able to pick it up from other people.
okay.
And I think also sometimes, I mean, I know you said the negative, which is not good, but sometimes being closed off and reserved and quiet, I don't think see that as a weakness sometimes. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
yes, you might,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. No, I
Because
meant
I
like
certainly was.
yeah, yeah. Like if they're in your class and you're having a hard time
Yeah.
getting a read on them, I was just,
Mhm.
heck, I love introverts. They're great.
Yeah. I don't
They
want
make
to put
the
the
best.
spotlight.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to put the spotlight on anybody who doesn't want the spotlight on them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I think that comes with respecting their boundaries. Some people
yeah,
just aren't gonna enjoy that.
yeah.
But going back to the negative, if they're exhibiting negative things,
Right.
making sure they're in an environment to where they're around people that are exhibiting positive traits, right? And
Mm,
then hopefully slowly they'll, develop and a little bit of the other people will rub off on them.
yeah.
And then, and if they're not, try something new.
Mm,
Sometimes, especially with sports and dance, it can be very competitive. So you put them into these things thinking that they're going to learn all these fabulous behavior traits, and
mhm,
it actually backfires because it's too competitive. It makes them feel self-conscious or it drops their confidence. You know what I
mm,
mean? So
mm.
making sure they're actually in the right activity for them as well, right? I
Oh,
think is important.
That's really wise. Another, I feel like that's a golden tip for today
Oh.
is really being aware of the environments that they are putting their kids in.
Mhm.
I can't remember who taught me this. It was one of my guests a long time ago, and so now my mind it'll take me a second. But they talked about talking to the coach of the team, or
Mm.
maybe if it's the dance leader, whoever whoever the adult is that is in charge of the activity,
Mhm.
and really to get to know them and to form a
Yeah.
relationship with them, and how
Yeah.
important that was. And I was like, wow, I never did that when my kids were younger. I didn't
Yeah.
think of that. I just assumed that it was fine, but I didn't think of like really developing that relationship. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts
I
about
mean,
that?
they're the leader, right? It's like when you're in a corporate environment, the leader sets the stage and the energy tone for the
Mhm,
entire company. Same thing with
mhm,
sports teams or dance teams. The leader, the coach is going to be the one who models initially, right? And if they come in very competitive, very, like you said, authoritative, then it's not going to suit a lot of the children very well.
mhm, mhm.
So yeah, they definitely set the tone. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left. And how
Okay.
would you like to spend that? Because, again, our audience is worldwide, so maybe not everybody can get
Mhm.
to your classes, but like, what are just maybe a few more things that tidbits that you could give the moms today?
Again, focusing that intention on the character strengths and the traits that you want to see in your children.
Hmm.
We are overwhelmed as parents. There's so much information being thrown at us on how to do parenting properly, right? We put our children into sports. We spend Saturday mornings and Sunday nights in the freezing cold or the heat to try and encourage, athletic strengths in our
Hmm.
children. We spend hours helping them with math and reading novels to them and teaching them all this stuff to develop academic strengths. I know my house is covered with glitter and paint in the hopes that my children will develop artistic strengths. And so we do all these things already as parents to develop these strengths, but the strength that really is the most important that leads, to have overall success and happiness and well-being and harmony in life are the character strengths. Yet they're
Mm,
commonly overlooked or assume that they'll be picked up, by doing other things.
mhm,
So again, focusing intentionally on these strengths because these strengths are going to be the things that really decide the pathway and the behaviors and the impact that you'll have in life.
mhm,
And another thing about character strengths that I think is so important is that it's fluid, right? You're not born with a certain strength and then that's it. So with IQ, which I know is a popular thing right now to discuss, is how IQ, you're just born with it, right?
mm,
Yet we're constantly doing puzzles and doing all these things to try and improve our intelligence and make ourselves
mhm,
more smart, which is great. But you can't really change it, but you can change, your honesty, your integrity, the core values that make you a person, that make you
mm,
that make you engage with the world. Those are something that we can develop and enhance.
mm,
So I think it's important to focus on that because if you're going to spend time on something, make it something that you have control over, not something you don't have control over.
mhm.
And so, yeah, I think character strengths are overlooked as a part of a necessity in raising children.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, this is not things that we were taught as children.
Mm-mm.
We
No.
didn't have this social emotional learning component when we grew up, so it
Mm-mm.
doesn't necessarily maybe come natural that we are outwardly teaching it. So I love that you've kind of like found this niche and you realize how important this is, and you're sharing your message and really getting that out there and it really explaining like why this is important. Coming on to
Mm.
talking to an audience like today and really bringing this to the mom's awareness, because I know, as we all are, we are kind of on autopilot. We're just moving throughout our
Yep.
day. And like you're saying, we focus on all these things, but maybe like one of the most important things that we could possibly imagine, we are actually overlooking because there
Yeah.
hasn't been a structure for us in the
Hmm.
past. And so I I,
Hmm.
I I think that what the work that you're doing is just incredibly important in creating good citizens of the world, creating good people, and helping moms help to do that for their kids. So going forward, how can people find you if they want to reach out, if they want to learn more about your programs?
Absolutely. So I have a website, reachforthestarsatx.com. And then I'm also on social media, Reach for the Stars ATX. They can private message me. On my website, I have all of my upcoming events. I
Okay.
have a few community events coming up at the Lake Travis Library. Um, I'm doing quite a few things, but I have everything that's available there. And then if there's anything that you don't see that you are interested in your children learning, let me know. I'm always looking for new ideas, new content. Maybe I had a parent actually reach out to me last year. Their children are going to a wedding. So I customized a wedding, how the
Oh,
I do's and I don'ts of being a wedding guest, how
smart.
to, how you handle yourself in that environment.
Mhm.
And so I'm open to ideas. And I would love to meet new people and be there for your guests.
That is really great. And I have a vision for you of kind of going national or going, global with like having some more courses that maybe are, digitally accessible for
Mhm.
other people. So that's my, magic
Send it
ta-da
to
for
me.
you.
I'll take it.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. So anyway, yes, be kind, be helpful, be funny. This is amazing. And Barbara, thank you so
Mhm.
much for coming on today. I
Thank
mean,
you, Laura.
just incredibly helpful and knowledge and just great information for all of our guests. So be sure to stay tuned to the Spanglish Radio Network. Watch it, read it, download it, live it. Thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.